The sun bled across the Arizona desert as Dosela Lonegoat's patrol truck crawled along Red Knife Road. 23 years as tribal ranger had taught him to recognize trouble in silhouettes. The small figure dragging something heavy wasn't right. Drawing closer, he saw a boy, no more than 10, barefoot and crying, pulling a burlap sack that carved deep furrows in the red dust. When Dosela reached for the sack, the boy's eyes widened with terror. Inside were river-smooth stones, each painted with names and clan symbols children who had vanished from the reservation. One stone bore his daughter's mark. She had been gone a decade, presumed drowned. Could his child still be alive somewhere in these unforgiving mountains? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Dosela's weathered fingers closed around the stone bearing his daughter's clan mark. The smooth surface felt warm despite the evening chill. He slipped it into his pocket before anyone could notice, then gently helped the boy into his patrol truck. "What's your name, son?" Dosela's voice was soft, careful not to spook the child further. The boy stared straight ahead, his small hands trembling. "Mateo," came the whispered reply after a long silence. "Mateo, I'm Ranger Lonegoat. I'm taking you somewhere safe." Dosela started the engine, watching the boy from the corner of his eye. "Can you tell me about those stones?" Mateo's fingers dug into the worn seat. "The bone takers made me carry their promises to the mountain." Dosela's grip tightened on the steering wheel. In 23 years wearing the tribal ranger badge, he'd heard plenty of names for the cartels that preyed on reservation borders, but bone takers was new. The drive to the tribal station took them past the turnoff to Dosela's cabin, a place he barely considered home anymore. Home had died with Sarah, his wife, 7 years ago when cancer took her. Home had vanished with Aya, his daughter. A decade passed when the river claimed her, or so everyone believed. Chief Raymond Blackhorse was waiting outside when they arrived, his broad shoulders silhouetted against the station's fluorescent lights. The years hadn't softened Raymond's face, but they'd added weight to his presence. "Found him on Red Knife Road," Dosela said, helping Mateo down. He was dragging a sack of painted stones. Raymond's expression hardened as he examined the burlap sack Dosela handed him. "Sick joke, that's what this is." He pulled out one stone, turned it over in his palm. "This is Kirby Whitecloud's clan symbol. Boy's been missing 3 years. There's more." Dosela kept his voice steady. "Almost 30 stones, all missing children." Raymond cursed under his breath. "Get Clara down here. Boy needs looking at." Inside, Mateo sat motionless under the harsh lights. The station hadn't changed in decades. Same cracked vinyl chairs, same coffee-stained desks, same map of the reservation with colored pins marking trouble spots. These days, there were more pins than map. Dr. Clara Whitefeather arrived within 20 minutes, medical bag in hand. In her 40s now, Clara had the steady hands of a surgeon and the patient eyes of a woman who'd seen too much suffering to be rushed. "Hello there," she said to Mateo, kneeling to meet his eyes. "I'm Dr. Clara. Mind if I check you over?" The boy remained silent as she examined him, flinching only when she touched his hands. Clara frowned, rubbing a strange red-orange residue between her fingers. "How long have you been walking, Mateo?" she asked gently. 3 sleeps, he whispered. Clara looked up at Dosela, concern etching her features. "He's dehydrated, exhausted. There's something on his hands, mineral residue of some kind, and his pupils are dilated oddly." Raymond sorted through the stones, laying them in rows on the station's central desk. 17 from our reservation, 13 from White Mountain and San Carlos. All missing within 3 years. He fixed Dosela with a hard stare. "You keeping any back?" Dosela felt the weight of his daughter's stone in his pocket. "No," he lied, meeting Raymond's gaze without blinking. "Listen." Raymond lowered his voice. "Don't go building this into something it isn't. Some sick prankster probably put the boy up to this." "You believe that?" Dosela challenged. Raymond's jaw tightened. "What I believe is we've got enough problems without chasing ghosts. I'll call the FBI, have them run tests on the stones." As Raymond walked away, Clara touched Dosela's arm. "He's scared," she murmured. Ever since those kids from Eagle Peak disappeared last month, the elders have been talking about the mountain taking children again. Old stories, Dosela said, but his hand unconsciously moved to his pocket. Maybe, Clara conceded, but old stories often have roots in truth. The boy needs rest and care, somewhere quiet. Dosela knew what she was asking. I'll take him to my place, just until we figure this out. As they left the station, Matteo suddenly grabbed Dosela's hand. The hungry mountain, he whispered. It's not finished taking. Dosela's cabin stood alone at the edge of juniper woods, its weathered logs bearing witness to 30 years of solitude. Inside, dust covered everything except one small shrine in the corner, a woman's turquoise necklace, a child's handmade bracelet, and a faded photograph in a silver frame. Matteo's eyes went straight to the photo as Dosela showed him to the spare room. Who is she? Dosela hadn't spoken Aya's name aloud in years. My daughter, he said finally. Aya. The boy's fingers hovered over the frame without touching it. She has kind eyes. She did. Dosela turned away, opening a cabinet for clean bedding. You hungry? While Matteo showered, Dosela prepared a simple meal of beans, cornbread, and dried elk meat. He placed his daughter's stone beside the photograph, studying the painted clan symbol, an eagle with a fish in its talons. Aya had been barely 8 when the river took her. The search had lasted weeks. They'd found her shoe wedged between rocks downstream, nothing more. Matteo emerged wearing one of Dosela's old shirts, the sleeves rolled up countless times. He ate ravenously, coming alive with each bite. Where are you from, Matteo? Dosela asked when the boy had slowed. White Mountain, he replied, near Turkey Creek. That's 3 reservations over. How'd you get all the way here? Matteo pushed his empty plate away. They took me from school, said my mum sent them. His voice faltered. There were other kids too. They put us in a big truck with no windows. Who took you? Men with snake tattoos. Matteo's eyes darted to the darkness beyond the window. They made us go into holes in the mountain, small holes where grown-ups can't fit. Dosela leaned forward. What mountain, Matteo? The hungry one. The boy's voice dropped to a whisper. It has teeth inside. Metal teeth that bite rock. They made us find the red stones. Dosela reached for his phone. I need to call someone. James Redfeather answered on the 3rd ring, his voice thick with sleep. Dosela had known James since childhood. One of the few from their generation who'd left the reservation, earned a geology doctorate, and returned to teach at the state university. A red stone? James repeated after Dosela described the residue Clara had found. Could be cinnabar, mercury ore. Old mines all through those mountains produced it a century ago. Mercury's poisonous, right? Highly toxic. Causes neurological symptoms, tremors, confusion, hallucinations. James paused. Where exactly did you find this boy? Red Knife Road, near the old Scorpion mine boundary. James let out a low whistle. That area's supposed to be sealed off. Worst contamination in the state. What would anyone want with mercury ore these days? Plenty of black market uses. Religious ceremonies in some cultures. But, James hesitated, there's an old Apache belief about cinnabar, spirit ore they called it, said to have special properties when processed a certain way. What properties? Protection from bullets, according to legend. Warriors would mix it with sacred materials, create war paint or amulets. Complete superstition, of course, but cartels are notoriously superstitious. After hanging up, Dosela checked on Matteo. The boy had fallen asleep, one hand clutching the bedsheet, the other extended as if still dragging his heavy burden. Dosela stepped onto the porch, the night air cool against his face. His fingers found the stone in his pocket. Could Aya truly be alive after all these years? The thought both terrified and electrified him. A sound drew his attention, soft, scraping near the steps. Dosela reached for his sidearm, then relaxed. A desert fox watched him from the yard, its eyes reflecting moonlight. Nothing for you here, Dosela murmured. The fox tilted its head, then darted away. Where it had been sitting, Dosela noticed something in the dirt. Kneeling, he found crude lines drawn in the mud, a map. At its center, a familiar shape. Scorpion Mountain with its distinctive double peak. Below it, a series of zigzagging lines like tunnels, and at the bottom, a single handprint, too small to be an adult's. Dosela glanced back at his cabin where Matteo slept. The boy couldn't have drawn this. He hadn't left Dosela's sight. Someone else was watching. Someone who knew what the stones meant. Someone who wanted him to follow. Dawn found Dosela at the home of Thomas Running Bear, the oldest tribal elder. The small house smelled of cedar and coffee. Running Bear sat in his wheelchair by the window, a blanket across his knees despite the growing heat. At 92, his body had weakened, but his mind remained sharp as flint. Dosela placed the eagle feather, a gift from his father decades ago, on the table between them, a gesture of respect and serious intent. The hungry mountain Running Bear nodded when Dosela finished explaining. My grandfather spoke of it. Just a name for Scorpion Mountain? Running Bear's weathered face creased. More than a name. Some places are alive in ways we've forgotten how to understand. He tapped gnarled fingers against the arm of his wheelchair. That mountain has always taken children. What do you mean, taken? Long ago, when sickness came to the people, children would disappear. Some said they were sacrificed to the mountain. Others believed the mountain chose them. Running Bear's eyes drifted to the feather. When the white miners came, they dug too deep, found the red earth that brings madness. Many died. The mountain was sealed with prayers. And now? Now men with new guns disturb old spirits. Running Bear's voice hardened. 3 border crossers came through last month, spoke of trucks entering the forbidden area at night. Men in black with green eyes like owls. Night vision goggles, Dosela murmured. The spirits are angry. The mountain grows hungry again. The old man leaned forward. Where is the boy now? At my cabin. Keep him close. He escaped for a reason. Running Bear picked up the eagle feather, pressing it into Dosela's palm. Take this with you into dark places. At the tribal station, Chief Blackhorse was waiting, his face tight with anger. What part of jurisdiction issue don't you understand? He demanded when Dosela entered. FBI's taking over the stone investigation. You're to drop it. A boy was trafficked, Raymond. Children are missing. And federal agencies are handling it. Blackhorse lowered his voice. Border Patrol intercepted cartel scouts 15 miles south last week. We're talking serious operators. Not our league. Since when do we back down from protecting our own? Since we started finding tribal police with their throats cut. Blackhorse slammed his fist on the desk. This isn't about courage, it's about strategy. You go cowboy on this, you'll compromise months of surveillance. Dosela held his ground. I found a map showing tunnel systems under Scorpion Mountain. Something flashed in Blackhorse's eyes. Turn it over now. Before Dosela could respond, his phone rang. Clara Whitefeather. I tested the residue from Matteo's hands, she said without preamble. It's cinnabar mixed with something else. Mercury levels in his blood are elevated, not immediately dangerous, but concerning. Could it cause hallucinations? Possibly, with prolonged exposure. Why? He talks about a hungry mountain, children being taken. Clara was silent for a moment. Dosela, I need to show you something. The river bend where Aya disappeared. Can you meet me there? An hour later, Dosela stood at the river's edge, where his life had shattered a decade ago. The water flowed peacefully now, belying its deadly current during monsoon season. Clara waited on the bank, medical bag at her feet. I used to bring Aya here for swimming lessons, Dosela said, the memory raw despite the years. Clara nodded. I remember. She was a strong swimmer. She knelt, pointing to the riverbed. Look there, among the stones. Dosela waded into the shallow water. Half buried in silt lay river-smooth stones, 3 of them painted with fading clan symbols. I walk here sometimes, Clara explained. Found them last spring, after the big flood. Didn't connect it until yesterday. Dosela lifted one stone, his heart pounding. These are older. 8 to 10 years, I'd estimate, from the weathering. Dosela looked downstream toward the canyon where the search for Aya had ended. She never drowned, did she? I don't know, Clara said softly, but someone wanted it to appear that way. As they walked back to their vehicles, Clara handed him a paper. Matteo's blood work. The mineral contains something else, a compound I can't identify. Whatever they're mining there, it's not just cinnabar. Dosela folded the paper into his pocket alongside his daughter's stone. "What will you do?" Clara asked. Dosela looked toward Scorpion Mountain, its twin peaks dark against the sky. "Follow the map." Grey light filtered through the eastern sky as Dosela loaded his truck. He'd packed essentials: water, food, first aid kit, flashlights, his service weapon, and a hunting rifle. The boy watched from the porch, the too large clothes making him seem even smaller. "You don't have to come," Dosela told him. Mateo's chin lifted. "I know the way better." The burlap sack lay on the passenger seat. Dosela had examined it closely in the night, rough-hewn fabric with strange markings stitched into the inside lining. Symbols he didn't recognize, but that reminded him of the pictographs in the ancient caves near Turkey Creek. They drove in silence, following backcountry roads that skirted the reservation boundary. Mateo grew increasingly tense as they neared the mountain, his small hands gripping the edge of the seat. "We're getting close," the boy whispered as they turned onto a rutted dirt track that didn't appear on official maps. The road wound through juniper and mesquite before dead-ending at a chain-link fence marked with faded, "No trespassing" signs. Beyond it, Scorpion Mountain rose in twin peaks like the raised tail of its namesake. "Fence wasn't here," Mateo said, eyes wide. "They must have fixed it." Dosela studied the barrier. "Recent work," he agreed, noting the fresh cement at the base posts. "How did you get out?" "Through the tunnels. There's a crack that goes all the way up." Mateo pointed toward the northern slope. "They don't know about it. Only the small kids do." Fresh tire tracks cut through the dust, multiple vehicles, heavy ones. Dosela checked his radio. Dead zone, just as James had warned. He tucked Aya's stone into his breast pocket, alongside the eagle feather. "We'll follow the fence line," he decided. "Look for another way in." They'd covered perhaps half a mile when Mateo suddenly pulled Dosela down behind a boulder. Seconds later, an unmarked pickup rumbled into view, dust billowing behind it. Two men in front, their faces obscured by the glare on the windshield. The truck slowed near their position. "Stay down," Dosela whispered, hand on his sidearm. The truck stopped. One man stepped out, scanning the area while lighting a cigarette. A snake tattoo wound around his forearm, a diamondback coiled to strike. "Bone taker," Mateo breathed, trembling. The man walked toward the fence, unlocked a gate Dosela hadn't noticed, then returned to the truck. As they drove through, something fell from the vehicle, a small black rectangle bouncing in the dust. After the truck disappeared and the dust settled, Dosela approached cautiously. A cell phone lay screen down on the ground. He picked it up, surprised to find it unlocked. "Must have been sitting on the truck bed," he murmured, scrolling through the device. The gallery contained dozens of photos, surveillance shots of the mountain, men unloading equipment, and images that turned Dosela's blood cold. Children working in what appeared to be mine tunnels, their thin bodies covered in reddish dust, faces hollow with exhaustion. "That's Miguel," Mateo said, pointing at one child. "They took him same time as me." Dosela continued scrolling until his thumb froze over one particular image. The photo was blurry, taken from a distance, a young woman with her back turned, dark hair braided down to her waist, directing younger children away from a tunnel entrance. Something about her posture, the set of her shoulders. "You know her?" Mateo asked. Dosela couldn't speak. The woman had turned slightly in the frame, her profile just visible enough. Older, thinner, but unmistakable. "Aya." With shaking hands, he called Chief Blackhorse. "I need backup at Scorpion Mountain, north side. Got evidence of trafficking operations, photos of captive children." "Stay put," Blackhorse ordered. "I'll send units to your GPS location." "No time," Dosela replied. "They're moving children right now." "That's an order, Lonegoat. You go in alone, you'll compromise." Dosela ended the call, slipping the phone into his pocket. "They're not coming, are they?" Mateo asked. "They'll come," Dosela said, checking his weapon. "But we're not waiting." An hour passed, then two. No backup arrived. When Dosela tried the number again, the call wouldn't connect. He checked the phone's signal. Nothing. They were in a dead zone. We need to move the truck, Dosela decided. They'll be looking for it. He drove a half-mile back, concealing the vehicle in a dry wash behind dense mesquite. As he gathered supplies into a backpack, Matteo stood watch, his eyes constantly scanning the horizon. "There," the boy whispered suddenly, pointing to a distant ridge. Dosela followed his gaze. Through binoculars he spotted them, two men in tactical gear, observing the mountain through scopes, not cartel. Their disciplined stillness and positioning spoke of professional training. "Federal agents," Dosela muttered. "Surveillance operation." "Why don't they help the children?" Matteo asked. A question Dosela couldn't answer. "Come on, show me this crack you escaped through." They approached the mountain from the east, using arroyos for cover. Matteo led confidently despite his fear, navigating to a section where erosion had carved a narrow ravine up the mountainside. "There are cameras," the boy warned as they neared the slope. "Men with night eyes patrol after dark." Dosela studied the terrain through his binoculars. Sure enough, security cameras were mounted at strategic points along the ridgeline, disguised as rock formations. Below them, a ventilation shaft rose from the ground, its metal surface painted to match the surrounding stone. "Sophisticated setup," Dosela noted. "Millions invested here." "The doctor says the mountain gives special powers," Matteo said. "Makes them rich, makes them safe from bullets." "This doctor, he works with the bone takers." Matteo nodded, his expression darkening. "He makes us handle the red stones, says children's hands make the magic stronger." The boy's breathing quickened. "Those who try to run or don't work hard enough get turned to stone." "Turned to stone?" "They make us watch." Matteo's voice dropped to a whisper. "They put them in metal boxes with the red powder. When they open it, his small body began to shake." Dosela put an arm around the boy's shoulders. "It's okay. You don't have to say more." "That's why I had to carry the stones." Tears welled in Matteo's eyes. "To show what happens to children who don't obey." As the sun began to set, they found the fissure, a jagged crack in the mountainside, barely wide enough for Matteo to slip through, far too narrow for Dosela. "This is how you got out." "Yes, it goes deep, to the lowest tunnels." Matteo pointed to dark stains on the rocks. "I cut myself squeezing through." Dosela inspected the opening with his flashlight. The passage twisted downward into darkness, impossible for him to follow. "We need another way in," he said. As darkness fell, activity around the mountain increased. Through night vision binoculars, Dosela observed guards changing shifts at concealed entrances. Trucks arrived, carrying supplies. From his vantage point, he could also see the federal agents still watching from their distant position. "Why aren't they moving in?" he wondered aloud. The answer came as headlights appeared on the access road. A convoy of 3 black SUVs with diplomatic plates. The vehicles stopped at the main entrance where armed guards ushered them through with deference. "Someone important," Dosela muttered. "The Snake King," Matteo whispered, terror in his voice. "He comes to taste the special powder." Dosela's hand went to his pocket, fingers touching Aya's stone. If she was alive, if she was inside that mountain, every minute mattered. He couldn't wait for bureaucracy or jurisdiction clearances. Matteo touched his arm, pointing to a guard post about 100 yards away. "The night, eyes are there, and guns, and keys to the doors." Dosela studied the position. 2 men, both armed, monitoring security feeds. Minimal cover approaching, but darkness was on their side. He turned to Matteo. "Stay here. If I'm not back in 20 minutes, use this." He handed the boy a flashlight. 3 quick flashes. Pause. 3 more. "The federal agents will see it." "You're going alone?" Dosela nodded, checking his weapon. Sometimes one shadow moves better than 2. Dosela moved like water over stone, each step placed with the precision his grandfather had taught him as a boy. The desert night concealed him as he circled behind the guard post, using scrub brush and rock formations for cover. The guards were careless, too confident in their remote location. One smoked, the cherry glow of his cigarette marking his position. The other sat inside a small shelter, eyes fixed on security monitors. Dosela lifted a fist-sized rock and threw it far to the right. The clatter drew the smoking guard's attention. As the man moved to investigate, Dosela closed in behind him. One swift strike with his tactical baton, and the guard crumpled. Dosela caught him before he hit the ground, easing the unconscious body into the shadow of a boulder. The second guard never saw him coming. Minutes later, Dosela had what he needed: night vision goggles, access cards, a radio, and most valuably, a folded map of the mine system. He returned to Matteo, who exhaled in relief at his approach. "You look like them now," the boy whispered, eyeing the goggles. Dosela studied the map. "This shows 4 entry points. Main entrance here, secondary supply entrance here, emergency exit on the far side, and..." He paused, finger hovering over a dotted line. "Ventilation shaft access." "That one," Matteo confirmed. "Few guards. It's how they bring new children in." The ventilation shaft was disguised as an abandoned water tank a quarter-mile east. Using the guard's access card, Dosela opened the rusted door to reveal a modern elevator inside. "Stay close," he told Matteo as they descended. The elevator opened to a narrow passage lit by dim red bulbs. Dosela kept the night vision goggles around his neck, ready. They followed the tunnel until it joined a larger shaft, an original mine passage reinforced with modern supports. The air grew warmer, thicker with each step, carrying the sharp tang of minerals and something else: fear. On the walls, small handprints marked the rough stone, some in dust, others smeared in substances Dosela didn't want to identify. "Children's marks," Matteo explained, "to find our way back." They passed abandoned mining equipment, repurposed for modern use: generators, air circulators, water pumps, everything designed for efficiency and concealment. This was no makeshift operation, it had been established for years. The radio crackled. Dosela tensed, listening to the Spanish voices. His Apache grandmother had insisted he learn Spanish alongside their native tongue, a skill that now revealed chilling details. Shipment arriving. 8 new units. Processing begins at dawn. Units. Not children. Units. A sound echoed through the tunnel, boots on stone. Dosela pulled Matteo into a narrow side passage as 2 armed men walked past, their hushed conversation punctuated by laughter. On their arms, the same snake tattoos. When they'd passed, Dosela and Matteo continued deeper, descending through a series of tight passages. The walls closed in until they had to proceed single file, then crouching, then on hands and knees. "How much farther?" Dosela whispered. "Almost there," Matteo replied. "Listen." Dosela stilled. In the distance, children's voices, muffled crying. The passage widened into a junction. Matteo pointed left. "Mining happens there. They make us dig where adults can't fit." He pointed right. "Sleeping place there." Dosela checked his watch. Almost midnight. "Let's see the sleeping quarters first." They crept toward a large chamber carved from natural limestone. Dosela activated the night vision goggles, surveying the room before entering. Inside, thin mats lined the floor where at least 20 children lay sleeping. Most appeared between 6 and 12 years old. 2 armed guards stood by the only other entrance, looking bored. "Do you see her?" Dosela whispered. "My daughter." Matteo shook his head. "Older ones go somewhere else after a while, when they get too big for the small tunnels." A girl near the entrance stirred, her eyes opening. She saw Matteo, and her expression flashed from shock to hope to terror. She shook her head frantically, pointing upward. Dosela followed her gaze. Cameras monitored every corner of the room. The girl silently mouthed a single word: "Doctor." They retreated to the junction. Dosela's mind raced. Too many children to evacuate quietly. No backup. No communication with the outside. "We need evidence," he decided, removing a small camera from his pack. "Then we find this doctor. He'll know where they've taken the older children." "He'll know about Aya," Matteo added softly. Dosela looked at him sharply. "How do you know her name?" "Everyone knows about the speaker," Matteo replied. "The girl who talks to the mountain. The speaker." Dosela felt the words like a physical blow. Before he could question Matteo further, a bell clanged somewhere in the tunnel system. The guards at the sleeping chamber snapped to attention. "Shift change," Matteo whispered, pulling Dosela into the shadows of an equipment alcove. Minutes later, a procession passed their hiding place. Children emerged from various tunnels, their small bodies coated in red dust, eyes vacant. Guards herded them toward the sleeping quarters while another group of children was roused to take their place in the mines. The efficiency of the operation spoke of long practice. Dosela silently documented everything with his camera. None of the children resembled Aya, even accounting for 10 years of growth. All were younger, smaller. When the corridor emptied, they followed the second group of children toward the mining operation. The passage widened, ceiling height increasing as they entered what had once been a natural cavern. Industrial lights illuminated a scene from another century, children crawling into holes barely larger than drainage pipes, emerging with pouches of reddish ore that adults collected and sorted. Mercury, Dosela muttered, noticing a broken thermometer discarded near a workstation. They're exposing children to mercury. Near the sorting tables, a man in a lab coat supervised the process. Unlike the armed guards, he wore a sophisticated respirator and gloves. "That's him," Matteo breathed. "The doctor." The man methodically examined each pouch of ore, occasionally consulting a handheld device. When satisfied, he directed the material to different containers, marked with chemical symbols. "They say he makes magic with the stones," Matteo whispered. "Turns people into stone, turns stones into protection." Dosela studied the operation, rage building in his chest. "Where do they take the older children?" "Down," Matteo pointed to a reinforced door at the far side of the cavern. "To the special place, where the mountain talks." A girl, perhaps 12 years old, emerged from one of the narrow tunnels, coughing violently. The doctor approached her, checked her pouch, then frowned. He spoke sharply, pointing back to the tunnel. When she hesitated, a guard stepped forward menacingly. The girl turned to re-enter the tunnel but collapsed, her breathing labored. The doctor shook his head, made a note on his tablet, then signaled to the guards. They carried her away through a different passage. "What happens to the sick ones?" Dosela asked. Matteo's eyes filled with tears. "Stone ceremony." Unable to intervene without endangering all the children, Dosela continued documenting the operation, his hands shaking with suppressed fury. They retreated deeper into the shadows when a new group entered the cavern, men in expensive clothes, led by a guard captain, visitors being given a tour. "Quality control inspectors," a guard explained to the visitors. "We maintain strict standards for the product." "And production rates are sustainable?" one visitor asked. "The local supply is nearly inexhaustible," the guide assured them, "and the workforce," he gestured to the children, "is easily replaced." One visitor nodded approvingly. "The boss will be pleased. When can we see the processing facility?" "After the demonstration tonight, the doctor has prepared something special." When the group departed, Dosela and Matteo continued exploring side passages. In one storage area, they discovered crates of processed cinnabar alongside modern chemical equipment. A whiteboard displayed chemical formulas and a production schedule. "I need to get a message out," Dosela said, checking his phone again. No signal. They found an unoccupied administrative office with a computer, locked. On the desk, a logbook contained lists of names, dates, and status codes. Dosela photographed every page, stopping cold when he reached a familiar name. Dosela Lonegoat. Status, TR, SP1. Location, P-Lab. "Tar," he whispered. "Transferred," Matteo explained. "SP means special." "And P-Lab?" The boy shrugged. "Maybe where the doctor does his ceremonies." A notation next to her name caught Dosela's eye. "Testing positive. Response to stimuli strongest of all subjects. Recommended for final phase." Final phase. The word sent ice through Dosela's veins. Whatever was happening in this mountain, his daughter was at the center of it, and time was running out. A distant commotion echoed through the tunnels. Guards shouted in Spanish, their voices urgent. Dosela pulled Matteo into a narrow maintenance shaft as boots pounded past. "They've found the men you hurt," Matteo whispered. Dosela nodded grimly. Their window was closing. "We need to find this P-Lab." They followed maintenance tunnels parallel to the main passages, using the hand-drawn map some of the children had created on a scrap of canvas. The map showed danger zones marked with skull symbols and guard posts, indicated by eye drawings. In one corner, a spiral pattern was labeled simply, Doctor. The deeper they ventured, the more the mountain changed around them. Modern mining equipment gave way to older tunnels with rotting support beams from the previous century. The air grew thicker, warmer. This area's not on the official map, Dosela noted, comparing the children's drawing to the one he'd taken from the guard. The doctor doesn't let normal guards come here, Matteo explained, only his special ones. They emerged into a large natural chamber where the mine intersected a cave system. Stalactites hung from the ceiling like stone teeth. At the center stood a laboratory that looked both advanced and primitive, modern analytical equipment alongside ceremonial objects. Glass containers held processed cinnabar in various stages, glowing eerily under specialized lights. A man in a white coat worked with his back to them, muttering to himself as he examined stones similar to those Matteo had carried. Each stone sat in a numbered tray connected to monitoring equipment. The man, presumably the doctor, applied a dark liquid to each stone, then recorded the reaction in a ledger. The ceremony of naming, Matteo whispered so quietly Dosela barely heard him. He finds which stones are worthy. The doctor placed certain stones in a special container while tossing others into a grinder that pulverized them into fine powder. This powder was then mixed with processed cinnabar in precise measurements. As they watched, a group entered from another entrance, guards escorting a heavyset man in expensive clothes. Even from a distance, Dosela recognized cartel royalty from the deference shown him. Senor Vasquez, the doctor greeted him, removing his mask. You honor us with your presence. Dosela finally saw the doctor's face, Victor Mendez, a geologist whose disappearance 3 years ago had made national news. The scientific community had mourned him as lost during a research expedition. Now he stood before them, eyes fevered with purpose. Show me, Vasquez demanded. Mendez gestured to the stones. Each contains the essence of a child who has handled the sacred ore. Their innocence, their connection to the earth enhances its properties. I don't pay for mysticism, Vasquez snapped. I pay for results. And you shall have them. Mendez lifted a red bandana from the table, the fabric stiff with some substance. This has been treated with the latest formula. The demonstration is prepared. They exited through the far tunnel. Dosela and Matteo followed at a safe distance, using parallel passages shown on the children's map. They emerged onto a crude shooting range carved into a cavern. A terrified man stood bound to a post, chest exposed. Across his heart, the red bandana had been affixed. Our volunteer, Mendez announced, a border crosser who thought to steal from us. Vasquez drew a handgun and fired without hesitation. The bullet struck the bandana and flattened against it, dropping to the ground without penetrating. Impossible, Vasquez breathed, approaching to examine the unharmed man. The latest formula is 60% effective, Mendez explained. With the speaker's assistance, we'll achieve perfection. The girl cooperates? She has little choice. The mountain speaks through her now. And the special ceremony. Mendez's face took on a reverential quality. Tomorrow night, the full moon aligns with the chamber. Her blood, freely given, will complete the transformation. Not sacrifice. A small amount only, mixed with the final stones and ore, the ultimate protection. Dosela's hand tightened on his weapon. His daughter was alive, and these men planned to use her in some twisted ritual. He had to get to her first. Where is this P-lab? He whispered to Matteo. The boy pointed downward. The deepest place, where the old Apache carvings are, the place of power. The alarm sounded without warning, a piercing wail that reverberated through the tunnels. Red emergency lights flashed, casting bloody shadows across the rock walls. They've found the guards, Dosela said, pulling Matteo into a narrow crevice as boots thundered past. We need to move deeper. They descended through maintenance shafts, following the children's crude map toward the lowest levels. The modern mining operation gave way to older tunnels, their walls marked with the pick scars of previous generations. Look, Matteo whispered, pointing to a red bandana tied around a support beam. Cartel marker. The deeper they went, the more the mountain seemed to close around them. Twice they had to backtrack when passages ended in collapse. Dosela's ranger training kept them oriented, but even he felt the weight of stone pressing down, as if the mountain itself resisted their intrusion. "It knows we're here," Matteo said, his voice small in the darkness. A distant explosion rocked the tunnel, sending dust cascading from the ceiling. Gunfire echoed through the stone. "Raid," Dosela realized. "Feds are moving in." They hurried forward, but at a junction, Matteo froze. Ahead, voices approached, guards evacuating deeper into the mountain. With nowhere to hide, Dosela pushed into the nearest passage, which narrowed quickly. They crawled forward until reaching a chamber where the rock changed, older, darker, lined with glittering minerals. Ancient drawings covered the walls, handprints, spirals and figures that seemed to dance across the stone. At the center, a circular depression held stagnant water reflecting their flashlight beams. "Apache sacred site," Dosela breathed. "The mountain really was important to our people." The pictographs told a story, small figures being led into a mountain shaped like a scorpion. Within, larger figures waited with outstretched hands. Some small figures emerged changed, marked with spirals on their chests. Others never emerged at all. "The hungry mountain," Matteo whispered. "It's always been taking children." A noise from behind sent them pressing into shadows. A figure entered, not a guard but a man in dusty clothes, who moved with the confidence of someone who knew these tunnels well. "You can come out," the man said quietly. "I know you're there, Dosela." Dosela aimed his weapon at the silhouette. "Who are you?" The man stepped into the light. "James Redfeather." Dosela lowered his gun slightly. "James, what are you doing here?" "Same as the FBI team upstairs. My cover's geology consultant." James removed a credential wallet from his pocket. "Joint Task Force, Tribal Liaison." "You're undercover?" Dosela kept his distance. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Couldn't risk it. Been embedded 6 months tracking this operation." James eyed Matteo. "I see you found one who escaped. Why didn't you move in sooner? Children are dying in here." "Jurisdiction nightmare. 3 agencies, cross-border implications." James ran a hand through his hair. "We needed to identify the entire network before moving. Tonight wasn't planned. Your adventure forced our hand." "They have my daughter, James." James's expression shifted. "Aya, that's not possible. I saw her picture. She's here, working with them somehow." "The speaker," James said quietly. "I've heard them talk about her. Never knew." He shook his head. "This changes things. We need to move now." "What do you know about P-Lab?" "Processing laboratory. Lowest level through the old Apache caves. That's where they refine the final product." James checked his watch. The raids focused on the upper levels. "Most won't even know these deeper tunnels exist." "Black Horse knew," Dosela said. "He tried to keep me away." "To protect the operation. He's been feeding us intel for months." James reached for his radio. "I need to tell them about Aya." Before he could transmit, gunfire erupted nearby. James ducked instinctively. "They're using the children as shields," he said grimly. "Feds can't advance without risking casualties." Dosela made his decision. "I'm going after Aya. You get Matteo out." "Too dangerous. Wait for tactical." "She's my daughter, James, and they're planning some kind of ceremony with her blood tomorrow night." James hesitated, then nodded. "There's a maintenance shaft through that passage, should lead to the lower levels. I'll get the boy to safety, then bring backup." He handed Dosela a small radio. "Different frequency than the guards, short range, but it might help deeper in." Dosela turned to Matteo. "Go with James, you've done enough." The boy clutched Dosela's sleeve. "I can help. I know things about the speaker." "What things?" "She marks the stones. She picks which ones live." The maintenance shaft narrowed until Dosela and Matteo were forced to crawl. The air grew hotter, heavier with mineral dust that coated their throats and burned their eyes. Matteo's breathing became labored, his small frame racked by sudden coughing fits. "You're sick," Dosela said, stopping to offer water. "The mercury exposure." Matteo drank weakly. Everyone gets sick eventually, some faster than others. They emerged into a forgotten section of the original mine. Ancient timber supports, petrified by time and minerals, creaked ominously. The walls here were different, veined with a strange reddish-purple material that seemed to pulse in their flashlight beams. "Pure cinnabar," Dosela murmured, "the main vein." A tremor shook the mountain, aftermath from the fighting above, or the mountain settling, impossible to tell. Dust and small stones rained from the ceiling. "We're getting close," Matteo whispered. "I can feel it." "Feel what?" "The humming. Don't you hear it?" Dosela strained his ears, nothing but the distant echo of the battle above. Yet Matteo walked with renewed purpose, as if drawn forward by something only he could sense. They rounded a corner and nearly collided with a figure emerging from a side tunnel. Dosela raised his weapon, then froze in shock. "Clara?" Dr. Clara Whitefeather stared back, equally startled. "Dosela, how did you—" "I could ask you the same," he said, lowering his gun slightly. "I followed you," she admitted. "After you left the river, I've been tracking this operation for months. Children from my clinic disappearing, coming back with strange symptoms." She knelt beside Matteo, checking his pulse. "Mercury poisoning. Advanced stage." She pulled medicine from her bag. "This will help temporarily." "You know about all this?" Dosela gestured to the mine around them. "Not the extent. I knew something was happening. Children with mineral traces in their blood, neurological symptoms." She administered the medicine to Matteo. "I've been documenting cases, trying to prove a pattern, when you found those stones." Her voice trailed off as she noticed the painted stone in Dosela's breast pocket. "That's Aya's mark." "She's alive, Clara. They've had her all these years." Clara's professional composure cracked. "The speaker, that's Aya?" At Dosela's questioning look, she continued, "There are rumors among the workers who come to my clinic. A girl who knows where to find the richest ore. They say she speaks to the mountain itself." Another tremor shook the passage, stronger this time. "The raid is destabilizing the old workings," Clara warned. "These tunnels could collapse. I'm not leaving without my daughter." "I know." Clara helped Matteo stand. "The boy needs medical attention. Take him out. Same way we came in." Matteo grabbed Dosela's arm. "No, I need to show you. About the stones." The desperation in his voice made Dosela pause. "What about them?" "She marks them. Special marks mean children to save." Matteo pulled one stone from Dosela's pocket, his daughter's stone. "See the small dot under the eagle's wing? That means protect this one. She's been saving children, not hurting them." Dosela examined the stone more closely. Indeed, a tiny dot marked the underside of the eagle wing, so small he'd missed it entirely. "How do you know this?" "She told us, in secret, said to remember the marks if we ever got out." Matteo swayed slightly, the medicine fighting against his illness. "She's been fighting them from inside, marking the strongest stones for rejection, so those children get sent away, not used in the ceremony." Clara steadied the boy. "If that's true, she's been risking her life." "The doctor thinks she helps him," Matteo continued, "but she tricks him, picks stones that will break his magic." A new sound penetrated the tunnels, helicopter rotors thundering overhead. The federal raid was escalating. "They're bringing in tactical teams," Clara said. Dosela checked James's radio. "Still no signal this deep. We can't wait. The ceremony's tonight." "What ceremony?" Clara asked. "Something involving Aya's blood and the full moon." Dosela's voice hardened. "Some superstitious nonsense the cartel believes will perfect their bulletproof formula." Another violent tremor shook the tunnel. This time, a support beam cracked, sending a shower of rocks and dust cascading around them. "The old Apache petroglyphs," Matteo said through a cough. "They show the way to the ceremonial chamber. Follow the spiral marks." Clara applied a makeshift breathing mask to Matteo, fashioned from gauze soaked in solution from her medical bag. "This will filter some of the mercury vapor. Not perfect, but better than nothing." Dosela traced the spiral petroglyphs with his flashlight. They appeared at irregular intervals, sometimes barely visible beneath mineral deposits. These must be thousands of years old. Our people have known about this mountain for generations, Clara said quietly. The elders say it has a spirit, sometimes benevolent, sometimes hungry. They followed the ancient markers deeper, the tunnels now entirely natural cave formations rather than man-made passages. The cinnabar veins grew thicker, more vibrant, seeming to catch and hold their flashlight beams in an unsettling way. The radio crackled with sudden static. A voice broke through. James Redfeather. Tactical Team Seaston Perimeter Heavy Resistance. James, Dosela responded. Can you hear me? Dosela position. We're following petroglyphs to the ceremonial chamber, still trying to locate Aya. Wait for Danga, Doctor. The transmission dissolved into static. The mountain seemed to swallow radio waves as readily as it swallowed light. The federal teams won't find these passages, Clara said, not without guides who know the old ways. They reached a junction where the path split 3 ways. Each bore spiral markings. Which way? Dosela asked Matteo. The boy closed his eyes, swaying slightly. The humming is stronger there. He pointed to the leftmost passage. As they proceeded, the tunnel widened into a large chamber. Metal shelving lined the walls, stocked with modern laboratory equipment. At the center stood a stone table, its surface carved with intricate patterns. Surrounding it were computers, monitoring equipment, and glass cases containing dozens of painted stones, arranged by color and size. The stone ledger, Matteo whispered, pointing to a leather-bound book on a pedestal. Dosela approached cautiously, opening the aged volume. Inside, meticulous records had been kept, names, dates, symbols, and status codes. Some entries dated back decades, the earlier pages yellowed with age. This operation didn't start with the cartel, Dosela realized. Someone was experimenting with the ore long before them. Clara examined the more recent entries. Look at this, children's names paired with mineral composition analyses. They're treating them like test subjects. Dosela found the section containing his daughter's records, pages of observations, measurements, and notes, all in the same precise handwriting. The latest entry chilled him to the bone. Subject SP1, Aya, continues to display remarkable sensitivity to mineral resonance, vein location accuracy 97.4%. Blood samples show adaptation to mercury exposure, no signs of toxicity despite prolonged contact. Preparations for lunar ceremony proceeding as scheduled, full integration anticipated. What does full integration mean? Clara asked. Before Dosela could respond, voices echoed from a connecting tunnel. They quickly concealed themselves behind equipment racks as 4 men entered, 3 armed guards, and James Redfeather, his hands bound before him. One guard shoved James roughly. Move, Fed. The doctor wants to see you. Your operation's finished, James said calmly. Teams have secured the upper levels. All exits are blocked. Upper levels, the guard laughed. The real work happens down here, where your people will never find it. They forced James into a side chamber and locked the door. When their footsteps faded, Dosela moved to free his friend. Not yet, Clara cautioned, pointing to a security camera overlooking the area. We need to be smart about this. I need to know what's happening to Aya. Dosela returned to the ledger, scanning the final pages. There's a schedule here. Ceremony preparations begin at sunset. Final convergence at midnight when the moon reaches alignment with the chamber aperture. Convergence? Clara frowned. That's not standard cartel terminology. Matteo tugged at Dosela's sleeve, pointing to a journal half hidden beneath papers. Unlike the formal ledger, this book contained personal writings, the private thoughts of Dr. Victor Mendez. Dosela flipped through pages of increasingly disturbed ramblings. Early entries showed a scientist's methodical notes on mineral properties and indigenous folklore. Later sections devolved into obsessive accounts of communication with the stone and voices from the mountain core. He's completely delusional, Clara whispered, reading over his shoulder. The final entry, dated just yesterday, sent ice through Dosela's veins. The girl is the key, the living bridge between worlds. Tomorrow night, when her blood mingles with the sacred ore beneath the full moon's light, the transformation will be complete. What the ancient ones began, I shall finish. The mountain has chosen her. She will become one with the stone, and through her, protection eternal shall be granted to the worthy. A tremor stronger than before shook the chamber, sending equipment crashing to the floor. The security camera sputtered and went dark. "Now," Dosela said, moving swiftly to the locked door where James was being held. The lock gave way under the butt of his pistol. James looked up in surprise as Dosela entered. "You shouldn't be here," he hissed, as Clara cut his bonds. "The doctor knows you're in the mountain. They're hunting you." "I'm hunting them," Dosela replied. "Where's the ceremonial chamber?" "2 levels down, but listen to me." James grabbed Dosela's arm. "You can't just charge in. Vasquez has brought in additional security, at least a dozen men, military trained. The raid is contained to the upper levels. They have no idea what's down here." James glanced toward the outer chamber. "Where's Mateo?" Dosela turned. The boy was gone. "He was just here," Clara said, moving to the entrance. "Mateo?" They found him standing transfixed before a large map on the far wall, a detailed cross-section of Scorpion Mountain showing all tunnels, chambers, and natural formations. At the very bottom, a large circular chamber was marked Convergence Point with tomorrow's date. "He's there," Mateo whispered, pressing his hand against the map. "Waiting for us." Before Dosela could respond, a slow clapping echoed through the chamber. From a shadowed alcove stepped Dr. Victor Mendez, his lab coat pristine despite the chaos above. "Ranger Lonegoat," he said, his voice eerily calm. "I've been expecting you." Dosela raised his weapon. "Where is my daughter?" Mendez showed no concern for the gun aimed at his chest. "Ah, so you know. I wondered when you'd figure it out." He moved toward a computer console, keeping his hands visible. "Put that down. If you shoot me, you'll never see her again." "Don't listen to him," James warned. "I'm the only one who can take you to her," Mendez continued. "The only one she'll trust." He pressed a key on the console. A screen flickered to life, showing a young woman in a small, well-furnished room. She sat cross-legged on the floor, eyes closed in meditation, dark hair braided down her back. Dosela's hand trembled. "Aya." "The speaker," Mendez corrected, "though she was Aya Lonegoat once, yes, before the mountain chose her. What have you done to her?" "Done to her?" Mendez seemed genuinely surprised. "I've protected her, nurtured her gift. She wasn't drowned, Ranger. She was saved." "Saved? You kidnapped a child." "I found her by the river," Mendez said, his tone reasonable, academic. "Locals had taken her, thinking to ransom her back to the reservation. When they discovered who her father was, a tribal ranger with no money, they decided to dispose of her." He gestured to the screen where Aya remained motionless in meditation. "I intervened, recognized something special in her, the way she connected to the land, sensed things others couldn't." "You've kept her prisoner for 10 years, Clara said with disgust. "Student, apprentice, not prisoner." Mendez's eyes took on a fanatic gleam. "She can hear the mountain speak, locate ore veins with her mind, sense which stones hold power and which are merely rock." Dosela steadied his aim. "I'm taking her home, now." "She won't go with you," Mendez said simply. "She doesn't even remember you. The mercury exposure as a child, the trauma, her memories before the mountain are gone. You poisoned her mind." "I saved her life." Mendez stepped closer, ignoring the gun. "Ask yourself, if she's a prisoner, why does she have her own quarters? Why is she not restrained?" "Because she understands the importance of our work." On the screen, Aya's eyes opened suddenly, as if sensing she was being watched. She looked directly at the camera, her expression unreadable. "You see?" Mendez smiled. "She knows we're talking about her." "Let me speak to her," Dosela demanded. "Impossible right now. She's preparing for tomorrow's ceremony. Her concentration cannot be broken." Mendez's voice softened. "But I could arrange a reunion after the convergence." "What is this convergence?" "The culmination of decades of research, the perfect union of science and ancient knowledge." Mendez's eyes gleamed. "For centuries, Apache shamans knew this mountain held power. The Spanish sought its mercury for gold extraction. I've discovered its true purpose, protection for the worthy through blood willingly given." You're planning to take my daughter's blood. A small amount only, mixed with the sacred ore under proper celestial alignment. Mendez spread his hands. She offers it freely, understanding the significance. She's been brainwashed, James interjected. She's been enlightened, Mendez countered. And she's not the girl you lost, Ranger. She's something more now. On the screen, Aya stood and approached the camera. Her fingers traced a pattern in the air, the same spiral symbol from the petroglyphs. Dosela stared at the screen where his daughter traced the spiral pattern. Not just any spiral, the exact pattern from his memory, one Aya had drawn constantly as a child. A pattern from Apache stories his mother had told them both. She remembers, he whispered. Mendez frowned, glancing at the monitor. Merely preparation gestures for the ceremony, her connection to ancestral knowledge. No, Dosela interrupted. That's her signal. Our signal. When she was little and afraid, I taught her to trace that spiral. It meant, I'm here. I'm safe. Something flickered across Mendez's face. Uncertainty. He quickly composed himself. Coincidence. The spiral is a sacred Apache symbol. She studied the old ways extensively. Let me see her now. Impossible. The convergence chamber is sealed until tomorrow night. Mendez checked his watch. However, I could allow you to observe the preliminary ceremony. She'll be brought to the preparation room in 1 hour. James moved closer to Dosela. It's a trap, he murmured. Obviously, Dosela replied under his breath. To Mendez, he said, I want to speak with her alone. After she completes her preparation rituals, not before. Mendez's tone became businesslike. I'm offering you a chance to witness her work, Ranger. To understand what she's become. After that, if you still wish to speak with her, I'll arrange it. And if I refuse, then my associates will hunt you through these tunnels until they find you. The raid above has them agitated. They'd welcome the distraction. Mendez spread his hands. I'm trying to help you, believe it or not, for her sake. Clara touched Dosela's arm. We need to know where she is. This might be our only chance. Dosela lowered his weapon slightly. Show me this preparation room. Mendez smiled. A wise choice. As they followed Mendez through the tunnels, Mateo kept close to Dosela's side. The boy's breathing had worsened, each inhalation a painful wheeze. He needs medical attention, Clara said to Mendez. Mercury poisoning. All part of the adaptation process, Mendez replied without concern. Some bodies reject the mountain's gifts, others embrace them. He glanced at Mateo. This one was too weak. That's why he was sent away with the stones. Sent away? You mean he escaped? James said. Mendez laughed softly. No one escapes without permission. The boy served his purpose, delivering our message to the outside world, showing what happens to those who betray us. Mateo's grip on Dosela's jacket tightened. He's lying, the boy whispered. I found the crack. They didn't know. They descended a spiral staircase carved directly into the rock, the steps worn smooth by countless feet over centuries. At the bottom, a reinforced door with both modern electronic locks and strange symbols etched into the frame. Mendez entered a code, then pressed his palm against a scanner. Only authorized personnel beyond this point. The mountain's heart. The door swung open to reveal a chamber that bridged ancient and modern worlds. State-of-the-art laboratory equipment lined stone walls covered in petroglyphs. At the center, a circular platform surrounded by monitors displaying geological data, chemical formulas, and video feeds from throughout the complex. My life's work, Mendez said proudly, the perfect synthesis of science and ancestral wisdom. On a table nearby lay a video recorder. Mendez pressed play, and the screen showed Aya in a different chamber, surrounded by painted stones, arranged in concentric circles. She moved among them, touching certain ones, setting them aside. The selection ritual, Mendez explained. She can sense which stones have absorbed the mountain's essence through the children who handled them. In the video, Aya picked up a stone, studied it briefly, then placed it in a container marked Reject. Why does she reject some? Dosela asked. Insufficient connection. Not all children form the proper bond with the ore. Mendez smiled. She has an uncanny accuracy. The stones she selects always produce superior results when processed. Dosela watched his daughter's methodical movements. To anyone else, she appeared coldly efficient, almost mechanical. But he recognized the deliberate precision in her gestures, the same careful focus she'd shown as a child when concentrating intensely. She's not collaborating, Dosela realized suddenly. She's sabotaging you. Mendez's smile faltered. What? The stones she rejects. Those are the ones with the strongest properties, aren't they? She's been working against you all along. Mateo stepped forward. That's what I tried to tell you. She marks stones to save children. Ones she puts in the reject pile get sent away, not used in the bad magic. Mendez's face hardened. Nonsense. Her selections are scientifically verified. By your tests, James said. Tests. She's watched you perform for years. She knows exactly what you're looking for and gives you the opposite. Mendez's composed facade cracked. His eyes darted between the video screen and Dosela, calculations racing behind them. Impossible, he muttered, reaching for a console. Her selections have been verified, double-checked. By your equipment, James said. Equipment she's watched you calibrate for years. A tremor shook the chamber, stronger than before. Dust and small stones rained from the ceiling. The mountain grows impatient, Mendez said, almost to himself. Then, visibly gathering his control, he pressed a button on his console. Security to preparation chamber, potential situation. Dosela raised his weapon. Call them off. Mendez smiled thinly. Too late. But don't worry. I won't let them harm you. Aya will be more cooperative if her father is unharmed. Gunfire erupted from the corridor outside, not approaching but receding, accompanied by shouts of alarm. Your security has other problems, James said. Sounds like the federal raid finally reached this level. Mendez's expression hardened. The ceremony cannot be interrupted. Decades of work, generations of preparation. It's over, Doctor, Clara said firmly. This operation is finished. You understand nothing. Mendez slammed his fist on the console. This isn't about drugs or money or cartel superstition. This is about power older than any of us. He turned to Dosela, suddenly composed again. Your daughter understands. She's felt the mountain's voice. More gunfire, closer now. Mendez glanced at the monitors, then made a decision. Follow me if you want to see her, he said, moving toward a hidden door behind equipment racks. The convergence chamber has another entrance. It's a trap, James warned. Of course it is, Dosela replied quietly. But it's our only lead to Aya. To Mendez, he said, lead the way, Doctor. But remember, if anything happens to my daughter, you'll never leave this mountain. Mendez led them through a narrow passage that spiraled downward. The air grew warmer, the cinnabar veins in the walls thicker and more vibrant. Mateo's condition worsened with each step. Clara supported him, administering something from her medical bag to ease his breathing. How did you find her? Dosela asked as they descended. After the river. I didn't, Mendez replied without turning. The mountain did. I was researching old Apache legends about this place, stories of children who could hear the stone speak. Then I found her by the river, half drowned, clutching a painted stone. He glanced back at Dosela. Did you never wonder where that stone came from? She'd been carrying it for days before she disappeared. Dosela remembered. A smooth riverstone Aya had found, insisted on keeping. She said it was special. It was. Cinnabar core, ancient pictograph pigments, likely ceremonial, placed in the river centuries ago. Mendez's voice took on a reverential quality. She'd been chosen long before I found her. You stole her life, Dosela said through clenched teeth. I fulfilled her destiny, Mendez countered. She showed remarkable aptitude from the beginning, locating ore veins, sensing which stones held power. The cartels came later, with their bulletproof superstitions, a convenient funding source for my real work, which is communion. Mendez stopped at a heavy stone door covered in spiraling petroglyphs. The ancient Apache believed certain children could communicate with the mountain spirit, open doorways between worlds. They were right. He pressed his palm against the center of the door. Nothing happened. Strange, he muttered, trying again. It always recognizes me. Maybe the mountain's changed its mind. James said dryly. Mendez shot him a venomous look, then entered a code on a hidden keypad. The door slid open, revealing a small antechamber. Monitors showed a larger chamber beyond, where a group of men in ceremonial red bandanas arranged stones in a pattern around a raised platform. On the central screen, Aya sat cross-legged in a separate room, eyes closed in meditation. A ceremonial knife lay on a pedestal beside her. "The final preparation," Mendez explained. "She centers herself before the ceremony." "When does she join the main chamber?" Dosela asked, studying every detail of his daughter's appearance. She'd grown so much, no longer the 8-year-old from his memories, but a young woman of 18, with the same determined set to her jaw. When the moon aligns with the chamber aperture, approximately midnight, Mendez checked his watch. 4 hours from now. Mateo suddenly pushed forward, pointing at the screen with Aya. "Look, she's doing it again." On the monitor, Aya's fingers traced another pattern, not the spiral this time, but a series of quick movements like sign language. "What's she saying?" Clara asked. "It's our old game," Dosela whispered. "Apache sign language. She's saying trap and run." Dosela lunged for the door, but too late. It slammed shut, the locking mechanism engaging with a definitive click. Mendez stepped back, a small remote in his hand. "Predictable," he said with genuine disappointment. "I had hoped you might understand, given time." "Open that door," Dosela demanded, raising his weapon. "The gun is unnecessary." Mendez gestured to the monitors. "You'll be released after the ceremony. I promised Aya her father would witness her ascension." On the central screen, a new figure entered Aya's preparation room. Juan Vasquez, the cartel leader, flanked by 2 guards. He wore an ornate amulet around his neck, a cinnabar pendant containing what appeared to be crushed stone fragments. "The final preparations begin," Mendez said, his voice taking on a ceremonial cadence. "Tonight, the circle closes. What was begun centuries ago reaches completion." "You're insane," James spat. "This superstitious nonsense about bulletproof amulets." "The cartel's interpretation is crude, yes," Mendez conceded. "They see only the commercial application, protection from bullets." He touched the monitor showing Aya. "The true purpose is far greater, protection of a different sort." Vasquez approached Aya, speaking to her with unexpected deference. Though the audio was muted, his body language suggested reverence rather than threat. "What does he want from her?" Clara asked. "Blessing," Mendez replied. "His amulet contains stone fragments from previous ceremonies. Tonight's will be the culmination, perfect protection through perfect communion." Mateo pressed against the glass, his small hand leaving a smudge. "She's afraid," he whispered. "Look at her eyes." Dosela studied his daughter's face. To anyone else she appeared calm, composed, but he recognized the subtle tension around her mouth, the same expression she'd worn when frightened but trying to be brave. "She's been planning something," Dosela realized. "All these years, selecting the wrong stones, helping children escape, she's been sabotaging your operation from within." Mendez smiled thinly. "If that comforts you, believe it. But consider this, if she truly opposed our work, why hasn't she escaped? The same passages Mateo used were available to her." "Because she wouldn't leave the other children," Clara said softly. "Noble, but incorrect. She stays because she understands her importance." Mendez turned to the largest monitor, which showed the main ceremonial chamber. "Look there, the convergence point." The chamber was circular, its ceiling opening to the night sky through a precisely angled shaft. Below this aperture stood an altar of sorts, a stone platform veined with cinnabar, surrounded by concentric circles of painted stones. "When the full moon aligns with that opening," Mendez explained, "its light will touch the altar where Aya's blood mingles with the sacred ore. The power generated will infuse the surrounding stones, creating protection beyond anything modern science can achieve." "Protection from what?" James demanded. "From what comes next," Mendez said cryptically. "The world is changing, Ranger Lonegoat. Your Apache ancestors knew this. They felt the tremors of the future and prepared." On the screen, Vasquez placed his amulet on a small pedestal before Aya. She passed her hands over it, lips moving in what might have been prayer or incantation. What happens to my daughter after this ceremony? Dosela asked, his voice deadly calm. She becomes permanent, Mendez replied. One with the mountain, the final speaker. You're going to kill her. Transform her, Mendez corrected. Her physical form will change, but her essence remains, as guardian, as protector. The antechamber shook violently, equipment crashing to the floor. A crack spiderwebbed across one wall. The mountain grows impatient, Mendez said, checking his watch. It's time to move her to the main chamber. On the monitor, Vasquez gestured to his guards. They approached Aya with what looked like ceremonial garments, a dress of deep red, embroidered with symbols matching the petroglyphs. Aya stood, accepting the clothing with a slight bow. As she turned away from the camera to change, her hands made another quick series of signs, barely perceptible. Dosela caught them. The stone, he whispered. What? Clara asked. She's signing about stones. Dosela reached into his pocket, fingers closing around Aya's painted stone, the one from Mateo's sack. She knows we have it. Of course she does, Mendez said dismissively. Her connection to those stones transcends physical proximity. Each one carries a piece of her intention. As if in response, the stone in Dosela's pocket grew warm, not body heat warm, but actively, impossibly hot. He pulled it out, startled. The painted clan symbol, the eagle with a fish in its talons, began to glow with a faint reddish light. Mendez's eyes widened. Impossible, he breathed. That stone was rejected. The glowing stone pulsed in Dosela's palm, each throb sending warmth through his fingers. Mendez stared at it with a mixture of awe and alarm. She marked it, Mateo whispered. Special mark, different from others. Dosela examined the stone more closely. Beyond the clan symbol, a tiny pattern had been etched around the edge, almost invisible unless you knew to look for it. The same spiral from the petroglyphs, but with subtle variations. It's a key, Dosela realized suddenly. Not just a message, a key. He pressed the stone against the door's locking mechanism. Nothing happened. Foolishness, Mendez scoffed, regaining his composure. The doors are secured with modern technology, not mystical. The stone flared brighter. The lock clicked. The door slid open. Mendez stumbled backward. Impossible. She's been planning this for years, Clara said, understanding dawning. The stones, the children, all of it leading to this moment. Dosela stepped through the doorway. James, get Clara and Mateo to safety. I'm going after Aya. You'll never reach the ceremonial chamber, Mendez warned. Guards at every junction. Security systems. Systems she's been studying for a decade. Dosela cut him off. Systems she's learned to control. As if confirming his words, the lights throughout the complex flickered. Alarm sirens wailed briefly, then fell silent. On the monitors, confusion spread through the ceremonial chamber as backup generators kicked in, bathing everything in red emergency lighting. She's creating a diversion, James said admiringly. Go, we'll find another way out. Dosela moved swiftly through dimly lit corridors, the glowing stone lighting his path. Behind him, James subdued Mendez and led Clara and Mateo toward an emergency exit shown on the security monitors. The stone grew warmer as Dosela approached the preparation room where he'd last seen Aya. The door stood ajar, the room empty, except for discarded ceremonial garments. Blood smeared one wall, not much, but enough to fuel Dosela's fear. He pressed onward toward the main chamber, guided by the pulsing stone and the sounds of confusion ahead. The corridor opened onto a balcony overlooking the ceremonial space. Below, chaos reigned. Vasquez shouted orders as guards searched frantically for Aya, who had apparently vanished during the power disruption. The cartel leader clutched his amulet, pressing it to his chest as if for reassurance. At the center of the chamber, the stone altar waited beneath the shaft of moonlight, now streaming through the ceiling aperture. Movement caught Dosela's eye, a shadow sliding along the periphery of the chamber. Aya, still wearing part of the ceremonial garb, but with practical dark clothing underneath, maneuvering toward a secondary exit. A guard spotted her. There, the speaker. Aya broke into a run as guards converged on her position. She moved with surprising agility, evading the first two men who lunged for her. but the third caught her arm, spinning her around. Dosela raised his weapon but hesitated. Too many guards, too far away, too great a risk of hitting Aya in the chaos. The stone in his hand flared suddenly, pulsing like a heartbeat. An answering glow emanated from the altar at the chamber's center, then from Vasquez's amulet, then from each painted stone arranged in concentric circles. Aya locked eyes with Dosela across the chamber. In that moment of recognition, her expression transformed from fear to fierce determination. She twisted free from the guard, snatched something from around his belt, a ceremonial knife, the same one Dosela had seen in the preparation room. "The convergence begins," Mendez's voice rang out. Somehow he had broken free from James and reached the chamber. The moon aligns, the speaker takes her rightful place. Vasquez stepped forward, arms outstretched. "Come, Niña, your destiny awaits." Aya backed toward the altar, knife raised defensively. Guards formed a circle, preventing escape. Moonlight bathed her in silver radiance as she stepped onto the platform. "Blood freely given," Mendez called out, "the final component." The knife in Aya's hand caught the moonlight. For a terrible moment, Dosela feared she would comply, that years of indoctrination had overcome her true self. Instead, she plunged the blade into the altar itself. The cinnabar-veined stone cracked with a sound like thunder. Crimson dust erupted from the fissure, enveloping her. "No!" Mendez screamed. "What have you done?" Aya's voice rose above the confusion, clear, commanding, and for the first time, Dosela heard his daughter speak. "The mountain rejects your purpose. These stones are not yours to command." The painted stones began to vibrate, their glow intensifying until the entire chamber pulsed with red light. Vasquez staggered back, clutching his amulet which now burned with the same crimson light. "What is happening?" he demanded, turning to Mendez. "You promised protection." "This isn't possible," Mendez muttered, staring in disbelief as the painted stones rose from their positions, hovering inches above the ground. "She's reversing the convergence. She's turning it against us." Dosela vaulted over the balcony railing, dropping to the chamber floor and rolling to absorb the impact. Guards turned toward him, weapons raised, but their attention snapped back to Aya as the altar cracked further, fissures spreading like lightning across its surface. "For 10 years, Aya's voice rang through the chamber. "I studied your science, your superstitions, your greed. I learned which stones you valued and marked them for rejection. I saved the children you would have sacrificed." The stone in Dosela's hand pulled like a magnet toward his daughter. Around the chamber, the hovering stones began to spin, orbiting Aya in concentric rings that mirrored their arrangement on the floor. "Shoot her," Vasquez commanded, drawing his own weapon. "End this now." Guards raised their rifles, but before they could fire, Mateo burst into the chamber, Clara and James close behind. The boy ran straight toward Aya, slipping between startled guards. "Mateo, no," Clara cried. But the boy was already at the altar, standing beside Aya. She placed a protective hand on his shoulder, her expression softening momentarily. "You brought them," she said. "Well done." Vasquez fired at Aya. The bullet never reached her. A painted stone intercepted it, shattering on impact. The fragments didn't fall but joined the orbiting cloud of mineral dust now swirling around the altar. "The protection works," Mendez exclaimed, his scientific curiosity overriding his panic. "But how?" "Not for you," Aya said coldly. "Never for you." More guards opened fire. More stones intercepted the bullets, each shattering to join the intensifying dust storm surrounding Aya and Mateo. Dosela used the confusion to move closer, taking down 2 guards with precise strikes. "Aya," he called out, fighting his way toward the altar. She met his gaze across the chaos, recognition and determination in her eyes. "Father," she acknowledged, "I knew you'd come." Vasquez backed toward the exit, clutching his now glowing amulet. "This isn't what we agreed, Mendez," he shouted over the growing roar of the dust storm. "Control your witch." "She's not mine to control," Mendez replied, his voice oddly calm now as he watched his life's work transform. "She never was." The moonlight intensified, the shaft from the aperture widening as clouds cleared above. When the full radiance struck the shattered altar, the swirling stone fragments erupted into brilliant crimson flame. "The mountain speaks through me now," Aya declared, her voice eerily harmonizing with itself. "These children are under my protection." The chamber shook violently, support beams cracked. The ancient mountain, weakened by centuries of mining and recent blasting, was finally giving way. "The tunnels are collapsing," James shouted. "We need to evacuate." Dosela fought through the remaining guards to reach the altar. "Aya, we have to go." She turned to him, eyes glowing with the same crimson light as the stones. For a terrifying moment, he feared she was lost to whatever power now moved through her. Then she blinked, and she was his daughter again. "Dad," she said, the word catching in her throat. "You found me." Vasquez made a desperate lunge toward them, firing his weapon at Aya. The bullet vaporized in the swirling mineral cloud. With a gesture from Aya, the fragments of her stone, the one Dosela had carried, flew from his hand and struck Vasquez's amulet. The pendant shattered. Whatever protection Vasquez believed it offered vanished. The backlash of energy sent him sprawling across the chamber floor. "The ore was never meant for weapons," Aya said as Dosela reached her side. "It was meant to seal this place." Another violent tremor shook the chamber. Larger chunks of ceiling began to fall. "We need to move," Dosela urged, taking her arm. "The whole mountain's coming down." Aya nodded, then turned to Mateo. "Lead them out through the children's passage. You know the way." "What about you?" the boy asked. "I have to finish this." She touched his cheek gently. "One last thing to set right." Mendez stepped forward, his face illuminated by the unearthly light. "The convergence," he whispered. "It's still happening, isn't it? Just not as I expected." "Not as anyone expected," Aya agreed. "The mountain chooses its own way."